back again with the Amplify podcast. This is the official podcast of the Association for Accounting Marketing. This morning we have a fantastic guest. We're very excited to welcome Lee Frederiksen from Hinge Marketing. Lee is based just outside of Washington, D.C. In Reston, Virginia. And Lee, for anybody that's not familiar with you, can you give us just a little introduction to yourself and to Hinge and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Well, I'm the managing partner of Hinge Marketing, and my background is I'm a psychologist by training, and I love marketing, and I love professional services firms because I think it's one of the most challenging and difficult marketing challenges there is.
Excellent. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about, I believe it came out in May, but the 2014 Hinge AIM Marketing Budget Benchmark Survey. I know this was something I believe was put out there at the conference this year and had some really interesting information in there. Some surprises to me, some things that I didn't expect. I don't know if you expected all of it with your experience in the industry, but I'd love to dive into that a little bit here today and just talk about what you found, talk about the process, talk about what you went through, and what were the interesting things and the exciting takeaways from this year's budget survey. So,
good.
Excellent. First, tell us a little bit about the survey. You know, what was the original intent? Where did the idea come from? And how did you and the AIM team go about conducting the survey and putting everything together?
Well, the idea of doing a study on marketing expenditures with AIM has been around for some time, but they seem to be running into two consistent problems. One is that almost no two firms categorize marketing expenditures the same way. They put partner discretionary budgets are in one and not in another. Salaries are in one and not in another. So any kind of gross comparison of that is very difficult to make because you don't have the apples to apples kind of comparison. The other thing was just the issue of confidentiality about, firms are a little bit concerned about submitting detailed marketing budgets to an organization that has their peers in it. And so, they had some, whether they were realistic or not, there was some confidentiality concerns. That's why we worked with AIM to come up with a process that allowed us to be an outside objective research organization where people felt comfortable that there was going to be confidentiality and all their peers wouldn't learn about their specific budgets. But more importantly, we were able to come up with an approach we think that really helped break through that apples to apples comparison. And basically what we did is we broke all the expenditures that could be considered marketing by at least somebody. We listed all of those out individually in quite a bit of detail. And people entered what they were actually spending on individual types of spending. And then that allowed us to compare apples to apples, what was really going on. And you could look at it and pull certain things out of the budget or put them in. And that's really a big benefit of that. I don't believe there's ever been a study like that that's that detailed that would allow you to compare yourself to your peers, but in the level of detail that allows you to adapt it to your situation.
Excellent. Tell me a little bit about when you went into this process. Talk to a managing partner at a firm or a marketing director at a firm and tell me how they can use this or how you envision them being able to use the information that you got in this budget to help them in what they're doing in their strategic planning for their marketing.
Well, I think that there's two uses of it. One is a fairly straightforward benchmarking, which is it allows you to compare what you're spending on marketing to your peers. And we have it broken down in terms of firm size. So depending on the size range of your firm, a small, medium, or large one, the geography within you're operating, whether you're operating in rural areas or major urban markets, and this allows you to kind of get down and really see the comparable kinds of firms to me, how much are they actually spending on different kinds of marketing levels. That tells you something, and if that's all that the survey showed, I think it would be valuable to be able to do that, because there's a lot of managing partners are asking, well, what should we be spending? You hear that over and over. Well, this kind of tells you what the market is, what the benchmark is. The other thing that we hoped we could get, but we were very pleasantly surprised, was we were able to look at the growth rate of the firms who participated. And we segregated out just organic growth, not growth that was related to a merger or acquisition, but just organic growth. And we were able to look at what the firms that were growing the fastest growing firms, how they compared to the slower growing firms. And we found some very interesting differences in terms of how they were actually spending their marketing budget and what they were actually spending.
Very interesting. We'll get back to that because I want to touch on some of those differences and give a little sneak peek into what some of those differences are. Can you back up a little bit from that detail part and just give us a quick overview of some of the high points, the results of the survey, and then we'll jump into, I think, the really interesting stuff, which is how those firms are spending their money differently between the different growth groups.
Sure. We had a response from 30 firms overall, and while that's a relatively modest number, when you look at it in terms of what's available, it's actually a pretty good comparison for a lot. And we found that a little over 2% of firm revenue is spent on what at least many people would consider marketing expenditures, including salaries. So that was an interesting thing because there's a lot of back and forth about what does the average firm spend. We found that there was a pretty good range, although no real systematic difference other than smaller firms tend to spend a little bit higher proportion of their revenue on it. And that makes perfect sense because you have to incorporate a certain basic level of a marketing function no matter what your size almost. And as you get bigger, that becomes a smaller and smaller percentage of your revenue, even though your department can grow. So that was one of the interesting ones. We also found that the largest categories that people were spending on were sponsorships and advertising, which, other than salaries being the largest, and then sponsorships and advertising. This was interesting in that it not only gives you kind of a center of gravity, but it really got interesting when you start to compare the difference between the high growth and the low growth firms in terms of how they actually spent the money.
Let's talk about the results you got when you first looked at the results. You first started putting them together. What's something that came in like you expected it to, and maybe what's one area that you kind of did a double take and surprised you a little bit?
Well, I think that the thing that surprised me the most is what we've seen in other areas. I didn't expect to see it here, though, because I didn't think that the sample was going to be large enough. But we actually found that faster growing firms were spending a little bit less on overall marketing expenditures than slower growing firms. So that's kind of that's a slap with a wet washcloth across the face, like, whoa, really is a better way and a worse way to spend our marketing dollar. And we were hoping to find something like that, but the fact that it came out so clearly was really a surprise.
Beyond just the high growth firms spending less overall, was there a difference in how they were spending their money? You talked about advertising and sponsorships being overall two of the largest areas. How were the high growth firms versus the low growth firms spending their money in those areas?
Well, that's one of the most interesting things is that the low growth firms were spending a lot of money on advertising and sponsorships and partner discretionary spending, that allows a partner to spend it individually, as well as non-educational events like receptions, that kind of thing. All fairly traditional things that you would expect from marketing, but all of those things were things that were not associated with fast growth companies. So this was another surprise, was how the spending pattern for high growth firms had shifted. By contrast, you find the high growth firm spending more on content generation, on marketing materials, customized marketing materials, on websites and online, on those kinds of expenditures that from a marketing director's perspective, you might think of those as content marketing, educational events as opposed to non-educational events. So the kinds of things that was educating their target audiences about their way of thinking, their service delivery, things that were useful to the target audience. That's the big difference. There's one other important difference, and I mentioned that it looked like the high growth firms were actually spending less on marketing. The difference was that with the high growth firms, they have more marketing people. They're spending relatively more on staff. So for an average firm, it's about 1 to every 64 or 65 employees, one marketing person for every 64 or 65. With the high growth firms, it was 1 to every 48 people. So in other words, they had a higher ratio. So in other words, if you think about it, step back is saying, okay, they're spending more on people and more on content and education of their target market. Those seem to be the things that are really associated with higher growth.
Oh, that's really interesting. And stepping back a little bit from just the findings, maybe from your experience in working in the industry, do you have any insight into why do you think some of the smaller firms are spending the higher dollars on advertising and sponsorships? Are those just easier ways to spend their money? They don't take as much time, they don't take as much effort, they can put money in those areas. What are your thoughts on why they allocate money that way? And obviously this is asking for a little bit of opinion here, but I think that's some of the reason why we
I think there are 3 reasons. One is just tradition. That's the way they've done it. That's the way it's been in the past. So if a person has been in a position for a long time and they're used to doing it, I think that's one of the things that will result in it. A second thing I think is partner pressure. They may not understand all of the developments in marketing and how you need to reallocate your spending. And so they've just been in the tradition, and they get someone approaching them from the local chamber, and they want you to sponsor a hole at a golfing event or a hospital fundraiser. And so the partner, if they have discretionary money, will say yes. And that's how they get so much money on advertising and sponsorships. While it may be good in terms it's a good thing to do for your community and you feel good about it, I think we should not confuse that with marketing.
That's an interesting point. I was actually fortunate enough to be able to speak at the AIM conference on marketing budgets and strategic marketing budgets. And one of the high points of that was to get things out of your budget, if possible, that really aren't related to growth or strategic marketing.
Exactly.
How would you recommend a marketing director? Obviously, they're not the top of the pyramid. They're not the top of the level of the organization. How would you recommend they go about that? And how can that benefit them if they can really carve out the part of their budget or the part of what's traditionally been considered marketing within their firm that's really strategic and really can benefit the objectives that they're trying to achieve?
What I would recommend, and what I've already seen work with some folks, is sharing the numbers and sharing the data. I mean, accounting partners are nothing if they're not numbers oriented. They certainly understand that and respect it. And by seeing that it can have an impact, I've already accumulated several instances of where folks said, once I shared this data with them and they looked at it, they said, we better be rethinking our marketing budget. So I think that's the best way. And, obviously that you may, as an individual, you may have a situation where a particular managing partner or a marketing partner will be impervious to data. They will have such strong views, but that's the way it is sometimes, that there might be people you can't. But we have really found that sharing the data and educating them about what's happening in marketing and what the results are from these firms, that really has a very positive impact.
Tell me a little bit of the difference between, obviously for AIM members, they can go in and they can get a sneak peek at this. They can go onto the AIM website, they can download the executive summary. Tell me a little bit more about what is in. I think AIM members also get a discount on the full survey as well.
They do.
Tell me how they can access that, and tell me a little bit about the type of information they'll find in the full survey.
Well, it's very simple to access. I have it written down right here. You go to the accountingmarketing.org, the AIM website, and there's a big button right on the home page that says Get AAM Budget Survey Now. You press that button and it'll take you right where you need to be. It is $300 for members and $600 for non-members. So right there you got it. If you're a non-member and you're thinking about doing it, here's another incentive point to do that.
Excellent.
Now,
very good. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to go on to your second question about what you'll find there, and I'll just kind of give you a little overview here right from the table of contents. Well, first of all, you're going to find the overall budgeting benchmark. So we looked at firms as a whole. Then you're going to see that broken down by the high growth firms and the low growth firms. So you see that distinction. Then you'll see the spending broken down by the size of the firm into smaller, medium size, and larger firms. And you'll see the same spending broken down by the market size that you're dealing with, whether you're in a rural, urban, mixed market, that kind of thing. And then finally, we have a more detailed breakout of all the kinds of individual items that actually went into the budget and their percentages. So a budget category may be marketing events. You may have events, and they may be broken down into whether they're educational, non-educational, so forth. So you can get fairly detailed in terms of what people are actually spending.
So to me, it sounds like this can be a really valuable tool, both in developing, refining your own strategy, but also in helping give some of the marketing professionals some firepower to go in and really affect that strategy and have a real discussion with management of their firm on how they're spending money and how they could be spending money to really affect the results they want.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. And we've seen, as I said, we've seen a number of marketing directors already that I'm personally familiar with that have made good progress on that. So I think it's a tool that every marketing director of an accounting firm, if you don't have this tool, you're selling yourself short because you're not getting the data that's going to really help you get in a position to drive firm growth.
Excellent. Lee, anything that we didn't cover today? Anything that you'd like to add? Anything you think people need to know?
Well, the thing I would like to add is we're planning to do this again next year, and we're looking for more firm participation. So even if you didn't participate this year, I think it's something to consider for next year. Right in the report, it tells you how to let us know if you want to participate. And there is that detailed breakdown. So frankly, what I would recommend is you take the budget breakdown that's right in the report, and you start to cast your budget in those categories. That will make it easier for next year for participating in the study. You'll have direct benchmarks. And we've even included a worksheet in there that allows you to compare your current budget to this side by side. So you've got a lot of tools, I think, where you can really make some really significant progress on your budgeting.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us today. Obviously, this is a really exciting tool. I'm looking forward to next year's, comparing one year to the previous year and seeing where you guys go with this from here. But obviously, very interesting findings in here, and I think a lot of useful information, a powerful tool for marketing directors. Get your hands on this. This is a very interesting survey. Like Lee said, he's already seen firms out there using it to positively impact what they're doing. Thank you again for joining us. A lot of great information. Hopefully we'll get you back on here in the near future and talk about some other topics and let you share some other insights that you have into the industry. So thanks again. I'm Steve Brunson with Catalyst CPA Marketing, and Lee Frederiksen joined us today from Hinge Marketing. So thank you again.
Thank you, Steve.
And we will see you in a couple of weeks with the next Amplify podcast.